Hello, I'm going to tell you a story which I'm sure you must have heard many times in your life. But this particular version of the story I owe to an author called Doris Orgel. And in this story there is an element which features very prominently, which is a small round made of wood and with two little holes in the middle. Yes, indeed, it's a button. So you will see how a wooden button features in our story. And the story starts with Mandy, a little girl, and her grandpa outside the corner store. They had been shopping for food, and they had bought a chicken. They had bought some bread, they had bought some tomatoes and some leafy greens. Each of them was carrying a bag full of goodies. And as they were coming out of the store, this lady comes up to them and says, "I am Ragtag Meg and I am hungry." Grandpa looks at her and says, "I'm sorry." "You don't worry," says Meg cheerfully and walks away. Mandy, the little girl, felt bad because they had all that stuff and this lady had nothing. Mandy and Grandpa get home, put away the food. Grandpa puts on his slippers, makes himself a cup of tea, sits in his armchair, and very soon drops off. Mandy was feeling particularly lonesome. She looks through the window to see Meg kind of dancing and waving at her. "I'm going outside, Grandpa," says Mandy. Grandpa nods and goes back to sleep. Meg and Mandy go for a little walk. And as they were walking, Meg sees an old wooden button on the floor and picks it up. She gets all happy with it, as if it was made of gold. Then, next to a rubbish bin, she sees an old pot and a spoon. She grabs them and says, "Just what we need." She takes the pot to the water fountain, and with that water she washes the pot. She puts water in the pot, builds a fire under it, hops on the fountain and shouts loud as bells, "Anyone who is hungry, come on out. I am making button soup." People came and looked in the pot. "Are you cooking button soup?" They laughed and they made fun of Meg. But Meg started singing. Button in hand, she sang, "Button, button made of wood, make some soup and make it good." And she drops in the button in the pot. People said mean things to her. "Whoever heard of button soup? She is crazy. She's a nutcase," said another one. Mandy, the little girl, stands up for Meg. "This soup is going to be great. All it needs is a little..." And she couldn't think of what. So Meg went on singing, button, button in the pot will a little help a lot. And so Mandy thought of her mum and how she used to make soup. And she said, "We need some parsley and dill." The grown-ups just laughed. But Steve, a boy from up the block, said, "Parsley and dill, we've got some." So he was carrying a rucksack, went back home and brought some parsley and dill and put them in the pot. And they sang, "Dill and parsley in the pot, will they help the soup a lot?" And great big bubbles came up. Meg said it wishes it had a few onions. The grown-ups just laughed. But a girl who had plaids said, "Onions, we've got some." So she ran home and brought 3. And she plopped them in one by one. The soup started smelling good, and even the grown-ups could smell it. Very soon, the lady from the cleaning store brought some celery to put in. And Mr. Wong brought some noodles. And Mrs. McGonagall brought some soup bones and greens and beans. And even Mr. Brown, old Mr. Brown, brought a carrot. And it started smelling delicious, and great big bubbles came up. Then, at that point, something was still missing. Even if it was smelling very good, something was missing. What do you think that was? What would you put in the soup in the pot? Are the vegetables, potatoes, beans, more carrots, pumpkin? Yes, and maybe other things that are not vegetables or food, like love and compassion and friendship and tolerance and diversity and acceptance. And yes, it's getting really good. But Mandy whispers something to Meg. And Meg nods as if she knew. Mandy runs home, wakes up Grandpa from snoring, dashes to the kitchen, grabs the chicken from the fridge, and drags Grandpa out the door. Gluck went the chicken when it went in the pot, as if saying thank you. And they were now singing and stirring and grinning. Button, button, made of wood, now this soup is getting good. And the people were smelling this delicious, and they said, even the ones who had said mean things to Meg at the start. And great big bubbles were coming up. Mr. Wong brought some bowls and spoons from his noodle shop, and Meg dished out soup. And they had seconds and thirds, and they engaged in this lovely get-together and in amazing conversations. And they had such a good time. It reminds me of the several get-togethers which we are really missing in times of pandemic. And even cats and dogs and squirrels joined in. So there were children and there were grown-ups and there were all sorts of people and animals. And when the pot was nearly empty, Meg scooped out the button from the pot, kissed it, and threw it in the air. And everyone looked up, and it went way, way high. And when the people turned round, Meg had gone. Whoosh! Just like that. But you know what? Mandy still has that button. And she will keep it all her life. And this is the end of the story. And I'm particularly fond of this character, Ragtag Meg, whom I think is a real leader. Now, what makes her a leader? Because other people may think that she's a trickster. I particularly think she's a leader because she manages to create a lot when there is nothing. She has this big idea as she finds something as insignificant as a button on the floor. And when her job is done, she vanishes out of humility. So I wish you a very Merry Christmas in times of pandemic, and I really hope that it finds us with a willingness to collaborate and to get together and to create a lot, even when we have nothing. Merry Christmas.